Hello, I'm Tony Marturano. Welcome to the Making of Haunted. And so like the rest of the world, we're on lockdown at the moment. So this makes the perfect opportunity for me to answer some of your questions. I receive a lot of emails from you, in particularly lately regarding Haunted. And so we're looking to answer some of those questions right now. So Haunted is a story of Ellie and Marco Battisto move into a house they inherited. And the plan is very simple. Renovate and get the place sold before deep winter. For them, this is really important because selling that house and the money that it will generate will be life-changing. But there's just one problem: the terror that lurks within. I do get asked this question a lot, and it's a good question. So much so that we actually have a notice at the beginning of the book that actually answers this very question. Haunted was written as a standalone novel, so it can be read on its own. However, it does make occasional reference to characters and situations from Psychosis. And so for the full Pile Mode experience, I highly recommend you read Psychosis first. And as for the series, I had no idea that Haunted would be as popular as it is. That was a bit of a surprise to me because as a writer, you just write. You don't often think about the end goal or the end game, if you like. So, of course, the popularity of Haunted took me by surprise. But what I can tell you is that I think Marco Battisto has much more to say, much more to experience. So there's definitely been a conversation about a third book in the so-called series, but you didn't hear that from me. The first germs of the idea for Haunted actually started at the end of the Psychosis focus group. One of the focus group members came up to me and said, "Tony, I really like the ending of the book, but it would have been interesting to see how it would have turned out if it ended like this." So I kind of thought about that, as the idea kind of stayed with me, but nothing really happened. I went into a very busy time in my life, not necessarily writing, but in publishing. And so it was a couple of years, I think. And I remember I was down in Cornwall. We were on location for a photo shoot, and I got up very early to prepare the equipment. I mean, it was the early hours of the morning. And this idea was kind of still with me, and I decided that I would just see if I sat down at the laptop and started writing the story with this premise. And, well, the rest is history. Well, PORTHCOVE is actually a fictitious fishing village. It is based on the many beautiful fishing villages in Cornwall, which is in the southwest of England, which happens to be my favourite place in the world. PORTHCOVE is one of those quaint little places with cobblestone streets. I know Marco refers to it as the land that time forgot. It was that it's like being trapped in an episode of Mad Men and Stepford Wives. The difference here, of course, is the fact that in Psychosis, Marco is in Dolce Vita alone, so everything that he's experiencing is generally him on his own, but in Haunted, he is joined by his wife, Ellie. In fact, their therapist goes as far as saying that he thinks that them both being in the house together and working on the project of renovating the place is actually a good idea, that for them it will be good. A communal project will be good, that it will be healing after what happened, which is all well and good in principle, but as a married couple, these things aren't always that simple. Marco and Ellie are already dealing with their own interpersonal dynamics. So of course, being to use Ellie's words, marooned at Dolce Vita only adds the pressure and makes the situation between them much more explosive. And it's this that makes the story so much more interesting to me, because whilst you have this house and everything that is happening in there, of course, not just things that go bump in the night, but much more terrifying things as well. You also have this relationship between this couple, which is complex. And I find that so much more interesting, because it very much makes the story character driven too. So you're not only invested in what's happening in the house and the environment around them, but you're also interested in what's actually happening between these two people. And I think that makes for a very compelling read. I'm often asked this question, and atmosphere and imagination. I think those are the two important elements to making a story creepy. For me, I like just enough information in a story to tell me what's happening, and then I like to let my imagination do the rest. And I write this way too as well. I like to give people enough information about a situation or scene, and then let their imagination fill in the rest, because I don't think there's any substitute for that. I mean, the tagline for Psychosis is "the mind is a terrifying thing," and I think it doesn't get more apt than that. Ha! Who told you that? Actually, it is true. This is what I like to refer to as my Stephen King moment, where King was famously known to have thrown his first novel, Carrie, into the bin before it was fished out by his wife. And of course, the rest is history. Haunted very much had a same moment, if you like, for me. It was written during lockdown. I was unable to travel to Cornwall for obvious reasons. So my whole writing routine was disrupted. And so for a few months I'd been getting up very early. I mean, I normally write in the early hours of the morning. And I had written this book, and it pretty much had been finished. I was at the end, but I decided that there was a whole chunk, if you like, of the story that I didn't necessarily think worked or was too much, superfluous for the story. And I had decided that I was actually going to cut it from the book. But before I did, I told myself that I would let my sister, who normally reads a lot of my work before anybody else, have a read of it and see what she thought. And so I was actually expecting her to come back and say, yes, you're right, you need to get rid of all of this. But she came back and actually said to me, Tony, this is probably some of the best stuff you've ever written. So, of course, after checking that she hadn't been sniffing something and that she wasn't teasing, it turns out that she was obviously telling the truth. So I reconsidered what I had originally decided, and thought that I would let the focus group have the ultimate say. I would give the manuscript as written to them, and let them come back with a verdict. And of course, again, I was expecting them to come back and say, hey, there's all of this, all of these pages, all of this section is too much. But instead they came back and said that it was brilliant. In fact, I think that Haunted is the first manuscript in my writing history, which at first draft, to receive an almost 10 out of 10 rating. Needless to say, it was a very emotional video conference. Again, the routine had been changed. Normally we'd meet for tea and cakes. That day we met on video conference, and It was a very emotional day for me, of course, to hear these people praising this novel that this whole time I'd convinced myself wasn't worthy, and that I had to try harder, which is an occupational hazard. You will have heard this before for authors. It's a very solitary, writing is a very solitary experience, so it's very easy to convince yourself of some of the things that aren't necessarily true. No, I did not expect Haunted to become a #1 bestseller. Again, it's like I said before, as an author, you have a story to tell and you tell that story, and that's your priority, to tell it in the best way you can. You don't necessarily think about the end goal, which of course I think probably unconsciously it's something that you do think about, but certainly not consciously. So no, again, based on what you've already heard happened with the early manuscript and the focus group, it wasn't what I was expecting at all, and I was naturally floored when Haunted was released in November. And I remember someone telling me that it was being featured by Amazon at the time as a hot new release. And I remember thinking, oh, that's nice of them. And then shortly after, I think a few days after, it became a #1 bestseller in one category and then the other. And then later, I think the next month when the audiobook came out, it too ended up on the bestseller list. And it goes without saying, of course, that for a writer, this is the ultimate acknowledgement of your work, and it's very deeply humbling, and that's all I've got to say on the matter before I get even more emotional. Well, this is a very interesting story because Psychosis and Haunted obviously feature the same character, Marco Baptista, and with Marco, in my mind, he always had this kind of particular voice, this kind of well-spoken guy who had been to public school, but at the same time he's from London, and I always had some, a specific way in which I imagined him sort of talking in my head, obviously when he talks in my head. And so we managed to get Roscoe Lewis to voice Marco, and I think he did an exceptional job for Psychosis. But Roscoe wasn't available for Haunted. He was busy working on other projects at the time, so the search was on to find a replacement, or a worthy replacement. And I remember we must have listened to hundreds of voices of potential replacements, etc. And one I came across as well was Jonathan's, and I heard his voice and knew immediately that I thought, I really think he could do Marco and he could perform Marco. And so I reached out to him, and he's a very busy guy. I mean, people here in the UK will know him pretty much as the voice of Channel 4. So he's always in great demand. But it turns out that he came back straight away and said he'd read the text. He's very interested in being involved in the project. And of course, I was excited by that because I just knew that he was going to be great for Marco. But even more excitingly, of course, Jonathan is married, like Marco, to Katie, and Katie is also a voiceover artist. So it was a kind of a double whammy. It was like a match made in heaven. And then production started that way, and I think they did an absolutely fantastic job. When I first heard the first edits, I was so very excited. And then, of course, to add to that, of course, because this is a ghost story and it's all about relationships, but most importantly, it's also about creepiness and spookiness. And it was very important to me that when people press that play button, they feel like they are immersed in the story. And so we also decided to add some special effects to accentuate certain elements, to make it even creepier and spookier. And I think that's what makes the audiobook edition of Haunted so much more compelling, and one of the reasons why it is as popular as it's become is because, again, when you press that play button, you're there. You're in Dolce Vita, you're experiencing what these characters are experiencing. And I love that. That's what makes it so exciting, that you, the reader or the listener of the audiobook, can experience what these people are experiencing. And so I'd highly recommend that if you do listen to the audiobook, that you turn the volume up. Of course, if you'd like to hear an excerpt of Haunted, the audiobook, you can find this on Amazon or Audible, or of course you can just log on to tonymarturano.com and listen to an excerpt for free. I think the only thing I can say about this is very much what one of the early reviewers said about the book, as they wrote, I think they wrote something on the lines that it was an epic ghost story. And that's one of the things that you actually see in the marketing material too. It says an epic ghost story, which is unusual, but I think that goes some way to explaining how Haunted ends. But of course I can't tell you that because I'm not going to spoil it for you. So with Haunted, I would say expect the unexpected. Not everything is as it seems. And look very closely, because if you blink, you may miss something, which will later come back to haunt you. There's a reason why the book is called Haunted, and it isn't just about the sinister things that happen there, but it also is about the things that happen to the characters too. So buckle up, as they say. It's going to be a bumpy, creepy, spooky, terrifying, twisty, epic, heart-wrenching ride.